Good evening. Tonight, we're diving into the story of the Ford Motor Company, an American icon, a symbol of innovation and resilience that found itself in crisis. But this wasn't a crisis sparked by foreign competition or changing consumer tastes. Instead, it was a storm that brewed right here at home, the result of a policy decision made in Washington, D.C. For over a century, Ford has been the company that put America on wheels, building cars and trucks that became part of the nation's identity. But just a few years ago, Ford hit a wall, one it never saw coming, thanks to tariffs imposed by the U.S. government on imported materials and parts. This isn't just a story about cars or corporate profits. It's about how a single government policy, intended to protect American jobs and industries, nearly crippled one of the country's largest and most storied employers. The ripple effects were felt far beyond the boardroom, reaching deep into the lives of everyday workers and their families. The Trump administration's tariffs were supposed to help American manufacturers by making foreign goods more expensive. But instead, they triggered billions in lost profits for Ford, forced the company to cancel car models, and brought real pain to thousands of workers who suddenly found their jobs at risk. Ford's struggle under the weight of these tariffs is a powerful lesson in economic cause and effect. It shows how decisions made in the halls of power in Washington can send shockwaves all the way to the factory floors in Michigan, Ohio, and beyond, impacting communities that rely on these jobs. In this chapter, we'll break down exactly what went wrong, how the tariffs backfired, and the very real human cost that followed. We'll hear from workers who lost their livelihoods and see how quickly a policy meant to help can end up hurting those it was supposed to protect. The irony is hard to ignore. A policy branded as America First ended up putting one of America's most iconic companies in peril, threatening the very jobs and communities it aimed to defend. It's a bit like trying to protect your house from burglars by setting it on fire. Sure, the burglars stay out, but in the end, you lose everything you were trying to save. In today's global economy, you can't just build a wall around your industry and expect everything inside to be safe. The world is too interconnected, and every action has consequences that reach far beyond our borders. Ford's story is a stark warning for us all. Pull one thread in the global supply chain, and the whole thing can unravel, leaving workers, families, and entire communities to pick up the pieces. So, what's a tariff? Let's break it down in the simplest way possible. A tariff is basically a tax that governments put on goods coming in from other countries. The idea is to make foreign products more expensive, so people are more likely to buy things made in America instead. It's a way to try to protect local businesses and jobs by making imported stuff less attractive. For example, the Trump administration put tariffs on steel, aluminum, and a huge list of Chinese goods. The goal was to punish what they saw as unfair trade practices and to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. It sounded simple. Make foreign goods pricier, and American companies will thrive. But here's the catch. American companies like Ford don't just use American parts. They rely on a massive, interconnected global network of suppliers to build their products. Building a car isn't just about putting together American-made parts. It's about sourcing components from all over the world. Japan, Germany, Mexico, you name it. Every car is a global puzzle. Think of it like making a pizza. If the government suddenly charges you 25% more for Italian pepperoni, your pizza instantly costs more to make. And it's not just pepperoni. Imagine if cheese, flour, or tomatoes were also hit with extra taxes. As a business owner, you're stuck. You either make less money on every pizza you sell, or you have to raise your prices and risk losing customers. Neither option is good for your bottom line or for your customers. That's exactly what happened to Ford when tariffs hit steel and aluminum. Suddenly, the cost of these essential materials shot up, squeezing their profits. The idea was to help American steel companies, but U.S. mills couldn't instantly ramp up production to meet all the new demand. So, they raised their prices too, making steel even more expensive for everyone. In the end, Ford had to pay more for steel, no matter where it came from, American or foreign. There was no way around it. The policy that was supposed to protect American industry ended up boxing companies in, trapping them with higher costs from every direction and making it harder to compete. The result? Ford and the entire auto industry faced a lose-lose situation, with higher prices, shrinking profits, and fewer customers walking through the door. The tariffs landed like a punch. In 2018, a 25% tariff on imported steel and 10% on aluminum hit automakers hard. For Ford, that meant $1 billion loss, money that could have gone to new vehicles, technology, or jobs. Instead, it vanished into taxes on raw materials. Ford was forced to cut thousands of jobs, a bitter irony for a policy meant to protect American workers. CEO Jim Hackett was blunt. The tariffs made it nearly impossible to plan for the future. Even buying American steel didn't help. Domestic producers raised prices too. Ford was squeezed from all sides, and sales began to falter. The financial pressure pushed the company toward crisis. The tariffs didn't just hurt Ford's bottom line, they threatened its future. The company was being penalized for doing business in America. The fallout was immediate, severe, and entirely avoidable. If metal tariffs were a body blow to the American auto industry, shaking its foundations and raising costs across the board, the escalating trade war with China was a knockout punch that sent shockwaves through the entire sector. In retaliation, China imposed steep tariffs on American-made cars, slashing Ford's exports to what had become the world's largest and most lucrative car market almost overnight. But the real disaster wasn't just overseas. It was brewing right here at home, in American towns and factories. Ford had ambitious plans to import the affordable, fuel-efficient Focus Active from China to the US market. But the new tariffs made the entire project financially impossible, wiping out any potential profit. The company was forced to cancel the model before it even had a chance to launch in the United States, a direct and immediate loss for Ford, and a missed opportunity for American consumers who wanted more affordable choices. The tariffs didn't just raise sticker prices, they sent ripples through the entire supply chain, dictating which cars Americans could actually buy, and shrinking the variety on dealership lots. President Trump claimed Ford could simply build the car in the US instead, but Ford's leadership made it clear the math just didn't add up and the costs were far too high. Retooling a US factory for a low-margin, budget-friendly car was simply too expensive to justify. The result? No new jobs, no new car on the market, and a lost business opportunity for both Ford and the communities that rely on auto manufacturing. The tariffs erased a potential revenue stream, limited consumer choice, and left both buyers and sellers frustrated. Ford's carefully crafted strategy was upended by a single government policy. The message was clear. Tariffs weren't just hurting profits or balance sheets. They were actively shaping the entire American automotive market, from the factory floor to the dealership lot. The Focus Active became a high-profile casualty of economic policy, a symbol of how quickly plans can unravel. And with that, Ford's future plans and the hopes of many American workers and consumers were thrown into chaos and uncertainty. Behind the numbers are real people. As profits shrank, Ford cut 7,000 salaried jobs, engineers, designers, and staff whose lives were upended. The very policy meant to protect American workers became an anchor, dragging them down. The pain rippled through Ford's vast network of suppliers, triggering layoffs across the industry. Communities that depended on Ford felt the shock. Many workers supported tough trade policies, hoping for job security. Instead, they got pink slips. The domino effect toppled jobs far beyond Ford's walls. The promise was a manufacturing revival. The reality was anxiety and loss. The damage didn't stop at Ford's gates. Tariffs raised the cost of new cars, adding hundreds of dollars to sticker prices. Families paid a hidden tax, and demand for new vehicles dropped. Dealerships, often small businesses, felt the pinch, with fewer sales and tighter margins. The auto industry slowed, acting as a brake on the entire economy. Wall Street noticed Ford's stock tumbled, hurting not just investors but employees with retirement plans. The auto sector is a massive engine for the US economy. When it sputters, the whole country slows down. Studies warned the tariffs could cost hundreds of thousands of jobs and stall economic growth. The policy created a headwind for the entire nation. The cure was worse than the disease. Ford and industry experts weren't silent. They sounded the alarm. CEO Jim Hackett said the tariffs cost Ford $1 billion in profit, and the damage was mounting. General Motors and Fiat Chrysler reported similar losses. Industry groups warned that tariffs would raise car prices by thousands and hurt consumers. Economists across the spectrum agreed. Tariffs are a blunt tool that often backfire. Reports from respected institutions predicted exactly what happened: lost jobs, higher prices, and less investment. Ford's leaders explained that U.S. steel was now the most expensive in the world, contradicting the policy's intent. The warnings were clear and consistent, but ignored. The result? Ford's slide continued, and the damage spread. The experts were right, but the policy stayed the course. The damage was relentless. The billion-dollar hit wasn't a one-off, it was a constant drain. Ford's restructuring turned desperate, cutting deep into its workforce and product lineup. The company abandoned sedans in North America, focusing only on trucks and SUVs. The tariffs made low-margin cars unsustainable, accelerating the death of the American sedan. More layoffs followed, and entire communities faced uncertainty. Ford lost time, money, and its competitive edge in the electric vehicle race. The company that once defined American innovation was now fighting just to survive. What can we learn? Ford's collapse under tariffs is a lesson in unintended consequences. Simple solutions to complex problems rarely work, especially in a global economy. The billions lost weren't just numbers, they meant lost jobs and broken communities. Policymakers must understand the real-world impact of their decisions. You can't isolate American companies from the world without causing harm. Ford's story warns against simplistic rhetoric and urges smarter, more strategic engagement. The lesson helps industry by fostering innovation and stability, not by starting trade wars. Anything else is just driving blindfolded, and that's how you end up in a ditch.